Hello, my name is Davis, and through this nugget video, I'd like to show you our approach for milestone one, which is configuration management of the project. So, before we get started, I'd like to describe the environment. Here, I will be executing, as you can see, Ansible host. This is my local host system, which is a MacBook, and I will be executing configuration.yaml, which is the playbook. And what this play does is it will configure a remote VM, a Vagrant VM with Jenkins, and it will once the Jenkins is installed and once that is up and running, I'm going to execute two build jobs on it, and each one build job for iTrust and the other one for checkbox.io. And when they both succeed, I'm going to do a post build action, which will execute a shell script. And what the shell script does is it will spawn two new VMs on AWS and configure the application on those two VMs. The reason for using AWS is because we face many challenges with nested virtualization because of the limitation in memory and RAM. So let me get started. So I am right now on my host system executing the configuration.yaml. So it's going to do an apt-get update and an upgrade and install Java, and all of these tasks are going to be executed on the remote Jenkins server, or basically the Vagrant VM, which I've already set up. And so it's going, in addition to installing Java, and so it also needs Maven for the build tasks for building the dependencies of the application, as well as npm, Node.js, Ansible, of course, and Python, and many other dependencies. So it's going to install all of that right now at this in this playbook. And towards the end of this playbook, I expect to see, if I go to the Vagrant VM's IP, I expect to, on the browser, I expect to see the Jenkins server. And the first task, one of the first tasks is to execute the checkbox.io build config, and the second one is for iTrust. And I should see them in the queue. The build jobs should get executed and should be triggered. So let me pause the video till Java gets installed. Okay, so as we can see, the Jenkins module as well as Ansible Maven 3 Vagrant is installed on the remote Vagrant VM, and now it's copying the checkbox YAML and iTrust YAML. These are basically the settings or the config files for Jenkins to execute the build for checkbox and iTrust. And also we need to add the Ansible repo, and yeah, now I'm basically installing Ansible on the remote side. So let me just pause it again. So now we have disabled the Jenkins setup wizard, and then I am going to install the Jenkins config file to disable security. A lot of pip files and a lot of I do install Python packages. Then I am going to edit sudo file. What this does is basically whatever commands Jenkins does, it's going to execute it as sudo rather than Jenkins user. Then I'm doing a service start of Jenkins after I edit that config file, and then I again wait for 20 seconds for the service to come up. And for doing so, I use the pause module. As now we have installed two more Git Jenkins plugin, which is used for pulling the application code from the Git repo, and then the post build task, which is essentially used by Jenkins to execute the post build shell script. And now we restart the service and we wait for Jenkins to come back up. So now the service is back up, and now we execute a script for adding credentials. This is for the pulling the Git code, so GitHub user and password, and then we create now a Jenkins job for checkbox.io. So if I go to the browser, essentially I should be able to see, I'm sorry, 1 second. So I should be able to see checkbox, and I should be able to see that this particular job, it has not yet gone into the build queue, and I expect it to do. And once it goes into the build queue, it will start execution. And so now if I go to the checkbox IO job, I can see that XML that I specified has put in these values, so, such as specifying the get URL, the credentials, as well as what to be executed for the build, essentially, which is essentially an npm install. So now if I go back, I should see that it should no longer be in the build queue, and it is actually getting builded. So let me check that. And yes, as I assumed, you can see now if I go and click on this, I can, oh, it's loading. So I should be seeing the build. This is the build console. I should be seeing what is happening while Jenkins is executing the build. So now it is doing it locally on the VM, on the Vagrant VM itself. It's doing an npm install. Okay, so as we can see, the build has succeeded for checkbox IO, and if we go down, it should go to the post build action. The first post build action is to execute creating the web server, essentially. So it executes EC2 instance, and for doing so, it will execute a playbook which will bring up this EC2 instance, and we essentially have to pause so that it comes up. Okay, so now we have waited for some time, and it's now went through. So the VM is up, EC2 instance is up, and if I refresh the page, I should see that EC2 instance, which is just now spawned. So yes, I do see that, and now I'm going to execute all of the build actions that are executed locally on that EC2 instance to bring that application up. Now I'll go ahead and pause the video. Yes, so it has installed the packages. Now it has copied the repo from Git, and now it's installing the npm modules, and then copying the default file from the checkbox IO box onto HC Nginx, and it installs also the application globally. So now the build has been successful. So ideally, when I go to the browser to that EC2 instance, which is 13.58.27.152, I should see checkbox IO, and I do. So now let us go on to the next build action. Okay, so now it's after checkbox IO is done, it's going to do the same for Jenkins job, and it should be in the build queue. Okay, going back to the main page, I do see I trust job on the build queue, and it's getting executed, and we can see the package. It's loading the packages locally and building it, and once that is done, it's going to do it remotely. So let me pause the video. Okay, so now as we can see, all the iTrust build is success locally, and now I'm again going to create a new web server, essentially a EC2 instance, and I'm going to launch that instance, bring it up, and essentially do the same action I did locally on that machine. So I would see that particular VM up, and yes, I do, and that's a web server, and now I would have to wait for some time for that VM to come up, and then I would execute the job. So as we can see, locally the build is successful, and then the PostScript gets executed, and then we see on that the VM comes up, and we are doing the post build task, which is also successful. So we see this new VM which is spawned, and if you go to the particular IP, I should ideally see the the Apache Tomcat application running over there. And if I go to Manager App, and I would see the iTrust application. So we can just try it out with a particular default sample user login, and yes, so it has worked. And I hope the session was informative, and thank you for watching.